All join palms. Repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put palms down. So welcome everybody. Intro to Buddhism and meditation. If you're here for the first time, you just learned that you should keep this space quiet. It allows people to be quiet. And that's really important in this practice. We spend most of our days talking and talking and talking, and once in a while even listening. And around so much noise and chaos. So spaces like this are built to be quiet. So we can just learn to be comfortable in silence, which is very difficult for a lot of people. I had a great teacher years ago, and he used to always say that, this was out in a monastery in Taiwan, and he would say that when you close your eyes and you go to sleep, it doesn't matter whether you're with someone or not, you're always by yourself. And, you know, we kind of come up in this culture where we think that we have to be with somebody or around someone. And that if we're with someone or seeking someone or working through something, that makes everything okay. And when he said this, it sounds kind of strange, especially in a culture where you're taught so much that you must go find someone to be with, that's going to, complete you, as the movie flashes through so many people's heads. Some of you know what I'm talking about. And so when he said, when you close your eyes and go to sleep, you're always by yourself, because that's what's in your head, it's just your own mind. And sometimes you could be physically next to or around someone and still be by yourself. And the practice is learning to be okay by yourself. So spaces like this are created to, yes, build community and, get to know one another and things like that. But you can do that silently as well. Once every few months, I tell this story, and I think the person's actually sitting here. But years ago, one of the college kids at a retreat, this is when we were still downtown, it was a day of silence retreat. And so it's 4 hours of silence, 4 hours of meditation, walking, sitting, 4 hours of just being with yourself. And there's a cleaning meditation portion as well. And afterwards, we were kind of reflecting on the experience, maybe a few days later. And somebody wrote or said, or both, that they never felt so close to somebody cleaning the refrigerator in silence. And I thought it was really beautiful, because we think we have to talk and talk and talk to connect. Next time you go to a meal with someone, a friend or something like that, see what it's like to have a meal in silence with them. I mean, I'm sure when you're talking, you're not gossiping or slandering anyway, so it's fine. But yeah. So thanks for being silent. Those of you who are always here or around me enough, not surprised by anything I'm saying. Those of you here for the first time, now you're kind of learning. So we'll do a meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. All right? It's not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. Right? Anyone's mind race all day long, just thinking and thinking and thinking. Okay? This isn't going to shut off your racing mind. Don't judge your practice. Meaning, don't ask yourself, is this working or is this not working? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You will hear sounds, right? Phones ring, people call, things like that. Just observe them as opportunities to come back to the present moment. Okay. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on the cushions, often it helps sliding to the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. Shoulders relaxed, hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you're in the chairs or benches, also just trying to sit up straight. Most important with the practice of meditation is don't expect anything, right? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. We'll be done by midnight. Just kidding. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guide the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice. Observing sensation of breath. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Where's your mind? Return to breath. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, the practice of meditation. To recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than anyone in this room, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for every one of us in this room, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what you get every single day. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most people, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your days. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Training the mind to be present is probably the most difficult thing you ever have to train. But it's also the most important. Taking care of mental, emotional health, and well-being is the foundation of your entire life. If we took taking care of our mind as seriously as we took all the other nonsense we spend our time with, then you'd be healthier. The Buddha taught we suffer a lot in our lives. The word is dukkha, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. Spending so much of our days surrounded by things that we're not comfortable with, people, places, or things. He taught why this is. He said very simply, people get greedy, they get angry, they get ignorant. We always want more. Steve, you all right?
Yep.
Just checking. We're often angry. We don't like the way things are. Want to change them. And we ignore the true nature of reality, meaning we want the world to be how we see it. And the world is how it is. Then there's our perception of it. So the very basic fundamental teachings of the Buddha are to overcome greed, anger, ignorance with the practice of generosity, the practice of compassion, the practice of wisdom. Wisdom, to me, is the most seemingly challenging one, but once you begin to recognize that your view of the world is not correct, it makes this practice that much easier. How many of you roam around all day long thinking that your views are wrong? I saw one hand back there. There's two. We got two great, wise people in the room who understand your views are wrong. I mean, just think about when you're in an argument with somebody, you're trying to prove your side of the story. Often we know we're wrong and we still argue just to try to win our side of the story. But we spend so much of our lives, and this is, to me, one of my personal favorite teachings from Thich Nhat Hanh, where he says all views are wrong. You know, there's this great Zen master, and he says all your views are wrong. And when I hear that, what that means to me is that I'm not going to, and he says nirvana is freedom from views. And to me, what that means is the way my view of that teaching is that I don't expect to abandon all my views. It's never going to happen. Nor do I think anyone else is going to abandon all of their views. But if I can begin to understand that my views are only based on my society, my upbringing, right, my conditions, all of these things that I've experienced my entire life shape my views. And we spend much of our lives convincing ourselves that our views are correct. It's funny, I said this to somebody earlier, but I remember the first day I showed up in Taiwan. I mentioned this briefly earlier, but the monastery there, and one of the nuns said to me, she said, everything you think you know about life, forget it. And while you're here, don't expect anything. Just experience it. And I shared that with somebody the other day going into a new experience. And I still use those teachings with so many things. Everything you think you know, forget it. And everything you're expecting to happen, don't. And that makes being with all the madness that we experience every single day easier. Notice I didn't say it makes the madness go away. Because no matter how much you hope and wish, all the people and places and things that don't do what you want them to do are not going to stop. The world is going to continue to operate in a way that you probably don't like it. And letting go of your expectation and attachment to views doesn't change that. But it helps you go through this crazy world we're in without being so angry, without being so bitter, without being so resentful, without having so much hatred. And you begin to see things as they are. And if I can do 20% of everything I just said, then phenomenal. I'm a happy camper. Gotta start somewhere. So with that, I'll just open up to questions. I'd much rather address things that are on your mind, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and we'll go from there. Yeah?
Could you say something about, I think you've been talking about.
Hang on. Go here first. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
I just wanted to say thank you.
You're welcome. Appreciate it. Yeah, sorry, Chuck.
Could you say, I've been thinking about it because I realize that I see it in myself a lot. And the word would be like arrogance. Can't quite, I think you've been talking about it, but maybe you could round it out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of talk about arrogance, from 11 to 12 on Saturdays and 7 to 8 on Tuesdays. But if I walked in here and I just said, you're all arrogant, how's that going to work out? Not well, at least until we're ready to hear that, you've heard me say this, but just in context for those who might be new, who's here for the first time? Probably a good handful or so of you, right? So if you walked in and I said, you're all greedy, angry, ignorant people. Oh, and by the way, you're arrogant also. How does that hit you? We don't all want to hear that. We don't want to wake up each day and think we're greedy, angry, ignorant people. And we also don't want to think we're arrogant. Nor do we want to think that most of our views are wrong. We don't like hearing that. We want to think we're correct and that we're nice people. So we want to come together and join palms and say namaste and om and hug each other and think everything's wonderful. But this practice is about looking at your greed, your anger, your ignorance, because this is what the Buddha taught is the cause of our suffering. And in all of that is the arrogance that allows us to think we know what we're doing. And that's kind of the example of when the nun said, forget everything you think you know. Right? If the entire practice is based on learning to end or remove or decrease or lessen suffering, and somehow I ended up halfway around the world or the other side of the world in some monastery, why did I end up there? Because I was suffering. So if I showed up thinking I knew what the heck I was doing, how foolish would that be? Right? But as soon as somebody put a mop in my hands and said, go clean the toilets, then I began to learn, well, I don't clean toilets. I think I'm better than that. The humility that's required in this practice is incredible, right? And from personal experience of someone who grew up having zero humility, right? And tons of arrogance, to shatter that brings a lot of peace. But that requires the honest look that says, wow, I think I am something special. We're really not. Now, of course, love ourselves, have compassion for ourselves. We're all special, wonderful creatures, right? But when I say to not think we're so special, I mean in relationship to others. We're no more important than anybody else, anyone. The person out there on the corner right now begging for food. We're no better or worse than they are. Yeah, arrogance is, and that's why, and I don't mean this as like a personal, because, one-on-one, I personally attack you. I don't want to do it too publicly. So what I'm about to say is I don't want this to seem so like I'm attacking at you. But that's why I'm always saying to you and many, the intellectual understanding of Buddhism, to me personally, put a mop in your hand and go clean the toilet. And that will cut through arrogance, Trying to intellectually understand how to awaken doesn't get you there. Doing things that you don't want to do, whatever it is, gets you there, I think. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned letting go of attachments, and that will take away resentments that we have. How do I go about letting go of my attachments? For me personally, my biggest attachment is my culture, South Asian, and the expectations my family, my parents have of the big Bollywood wedding and, the happily ever after and all that stuff. And I grew up with that mentality, and I still kind of do believe another person completes me, or there's a soulmate out there. I believe in destiny. But I know that's also my kryptonite, because that's my attachment to the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, it's so simple. I'll just give you the answer and you'll be fine.
thank you.
What you're really asking about is the essence and the heart of this practice, which is to have the Eightfold Path, right? I'll run through it very quickly for those who might be brand new. Four Noble Truths, the first thing the Buddha taught. First one is suffering, the second one is the cause, greed, anger, ignorance. The third one is the ending, nirvana, liberation, freedom from suffering. The fourth one is the path that leads to the ending of suffering, right? It's called the Four Noble Truths. And the fourth one is the Eightfold Path, right? To have the correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration, all of that's on Google for free, right? Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, most translations are fine, okay? Stay on the first 3 pages of Google searches though when you look for those. What you're talking about specifically is the correct view. That's where it all starts. You referenced your parents' view. You referenced your culture's view. You referenced your family's view. Within all of that is now your whole network of friends, right? Neighbors, brothers, sisters, cousins, whatever. There's a whole lot of people there that it sounds like you're trying to live out their view for your life. And here you are. First is to understand that nobody else lives your life but you. We face pressures and burdens from family and friends, society, things like that every single day. Right? The how to do that, that's the tricky part. Right? It takes time, but we want to cut through attachments, is really what you're asking. And you went straight to a lot of heavy attachments, right? Are you wearing socks right now?
Yes.
Do they match?
Yes.
All right. So I have your first lesson on how to cut through the attachments that you have, getting over your family's views that have been for God knows how many generations, right? I mean, you get my point. It was kind of a joke that didn't really work, but you understand my point. It's been there a long time. You have a sock drawer. Sorry to get so personal.
Yes.
Are your socks like all rolled up, matching, or are they thrown randomly?
Depends on the day.
Depends on the day, right? Well, so here's homework for you. Okay, so you're gonna go home tonight, and you're gonna, if they are rolled up, you're gonna separate them. You're gonna, mess them all up in the drawer. And tomorrow, when you go to work, do you go to school, do you sleep all day? Where are you at tomorrow?
A mix of both.
Okay, so when you get up at morning, afternoon, whatever time you get up at, you're gonna go in your sock drawer. You're gonna close your eyes, you're gonna take out 2 socks. They're not gonna match. If you grab a pair that matches, it doesn't mean you win. You put one back, you take a different one. And I want you to spend your day tomorrow wearing 2 socks that don't match. Right? Can you repeat that? Oh boy, is what you just said. So if you're brand new to Buddhism and you came here for the first time and you're like, I want to learn about Buddhism, and this dude up there is talking about what socks I should wear, I want you to rethink of this for a minute. His question is about how to cut through attachment to views that have been put on him his entire life from his family. And he's already uncomfortable at the thought of wearing 2 different socks. I'll tell you this, if you can't wear 2 different socks, you're never going to conquer the first thing you just asked about. Ever. It would be much easier to just give in and go get married tomorrow. Right? Try the 2 socks. Try it for a week. You want a second homework assignment? Or is that one enough?
I'll take it.
Okay. Do you ever go out to eat? And this is for everybody, of course, as well, because I'm sure he's not the only one. What's your name?
Michael.
Michael. I'm sure Michael's not the only one in here who has, stuff like this that they're dealing with. So when you go out to eat at a restaurant, you sit down, you get a menu, right? You sit there for a couple minutes, figuring out what to eat, tell them how you want it prepared, what level of spice you want, whatever it is. Next time you go out to eat, just say, how much did you spend on a meal? $10, $20? What do you spend? Also depends probably.
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
roughly like 25.
$25. So next time you sit down for a meal, say to the person who comes over to take your order, if that's the case, I have $25 I'd like to spend on this meal, and I am vegetarian or gluten-free, or I'm deathly allergic to peanuts or whatever it might be. And say, bring me anything on the menu to eat. And then when the food comes out, you know what you're gonna do? You're just going to eat it, right? Does that make sense?
Yes. That one's a little bit easier. 'Cause
Yeah.
I love food, so.
I figured, I could tell by your expression that one wasn't as painful. So stick to the sock one first. But, to kind of wrap up that thought, we look at Buddhism and we approach it from like, how do I overcome tremendous suffering? We're so attached to what our hair looks like, what our clothes look like, what cars we drive, who we talk to, how we talk, what emojis we use. Like, we're so attached to these silly little things. Work on those. To me, these are baby steps. Yeah. And keep adding in fun things like that for many years. And then eventually, I don't know, maybe your parents will just give up and leave you alone. Yeah.
Did you just give us a lesson on how to conquer the sock nest monster?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, if you always lose a sock, then you don't have to worry about that anymore. Yeah. Other questions? Meditation, Buddhist practice. Socks. Like, I really think that's the advance of Buddhist teaching. Because it's so hard to do. Yeah.
How long have you been meditating?
I started meditation for the very first time ever 24 years ago. And I've been doing this every day for 16 years. And my head is still a mess. So you have that to look forward to.
And you're not wearing socks.
I am not. Yeah. That would be a true statement. Yeah.
So just don't wear socks.
But that doesn't help you get over attachment. Then you could become attached to not wearing socks. So you can always manipulate everything. And again, how is this all new to you?
About 6 months in.
Okay. And I know you're kind of joking as well, at least I think you are, but the practice isn't about wearing socks or not wearing socks. You could do the same thing with what shirt you wear. Do you ever get dressed in the morning, put on clothes, and you're like, yes, this definitely does not match, I'm going to wear it. No, it's like, does my hat match my jacket? Does my jacket match my shirt? Do my shoes match? We plan our outfits. I come from that world. It was hell. It caused me so much suffering. Like spending an hour trying to figure out what's the perfect thing to wear to send some message that says I look a certain way. That's torture. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
What was the point where you decided that you really wanted to delve into like hardcore Buddhism or meditation or whatever it was?
Sure. There was one very specific moment. I'll kind of sum it up, but I got introduced to it in college and I was 20, read Intro to Zen by D.T. Suzuki and thought it was a phenomenal book. Aligned with a lot of how I saw the world, but at the same time, I was a 20-year-old college kid and living some little Buddhist life was definitely not, in my plans at that time. Graduated college, did consulting for 7-8 years and made a lot of money because I thought if I made a lot of money, bought a lot of stuff and had lots of socks that matched and cars and houses, then of course I'd be happy, right? Get everything you're supposed to get. Still miserable. 2003, started going to a Buddhist temple here in San Diego, about a mile down the road. spent 2+ years there. And then they said, you want to move to our monastery in Taiwan? But the moment that it occurred was 2003. I was in line at a club downtown called On Broadway. I don't know if it's still there. And I was with my buddies, and it was their birthday, and I'm standing in line. And that time I knew that I had this kind of realization in my head, and I don't mean like an outer body experience. It wasn't like some vision. It was just, you ever done something a lot? You have this thought like, yeah, this is what's going to happen. That's what it was. And I stood in line and I realized that I had no patience, had money. So I was going to get us out of the line into the VIP line, spend probably a couple $100, give the dude money at the door to let us in that line. And then I was going to pay another, whatever, $100 to get us all in. And then I was going to get inside and buy us all drinks and run around chasing somebody around all night, getting drunk and waking up the next day and feel like crap. I had that thought in like 20 seconds because that's what I'd done a million times. And continued with the night. That's exactly what happened. Woke up the next day at noon and realized I need to go back to this temple that I'd gone to 6 months earlier. 6 months earlier, one of my best friends, Kristen, she said, I need to go observe a religious experience somewhere for her graduate program at San Diego State. So I went to this temple with her. And I sat down in the front row right over here, looked up at this big Buddhist statue, and I was like, oh my God, I don't ever want to leave. It was the most incredible feeling. And I talked to the nun after, and she said, we talked, and she said, Jeff, you work so hard to make so much money to buy so many things. If you didn't have so many things, you wouldn't need so much money, you wouldn't have to work so hard. That clicked, drastically changed my life. I told her I'd see her tomorrow. 6 months went by, I never went back. And then that night happened downtown and went back the next day at noon. That was it. That was 2003. So it wasn't like something happened from trying it. And that's why I kind of, those of you who know me enough, like Buddhism is really special and important, but it's not about Buddhism. It's not about religion. It's not about some deep philosophy. It's not about Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, Buddhism, Muslim, pagan. It's not about those things. It's about getting to know the nature of your mind and what causes your suffering. And when you finally say, I've had enough. And that, the question, which required a bit of a story, but it was very easy that next day when I woke up, I said, I've had enough. I wasn't an addict, right? It wasn't that I was like hit some rock bottom. I didn't want to be depressed and angry anymore. So it's like, okay, I felt something 6 months earlier sitting in that seat at that temple. I wanted that feeling again. And that wasn't from reading a book. It wasn't from listening to a Dharma talk, right? It was from just being. And that's what I craved. And that's when, the great teachers talking, the Buddha talked about healthy craving, healthy desire. I had a desire and a craving to have that sense of calm and peaceful feeling again.
Good for you.
Thanks. Yeah. So, does that answer your question? Yeah, in the back.
We were talking before about expectations, responsibility, culture, things like that. And we talked about breaking attachment. Is there anything inherently wrong with those things? They bring a lot of people meeting, or is it our relationship with those things?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll kind of close with this thought as we wrap up. First, just in the way the nature of your question, which is common, Buddhist teachings are really all about exploring the intention behind your actions and not to look at things, even with precepts. I mean, the monks and nuns had rules that they followed, but not to look at these precepts or anything we do as wrong, but to look at it as karma, meaning the law of cause and effect. So everything we do has an effect. But if we get wrapped up in thinking what's right versus what's wrong, then we get wrapped up in asking ourselves, well, who determines that, right? So I know that's not the nature of your question. I just wanted to say that first, because I think it's really important always to look at the intention behind our actions. Is it coming from loving kindness, compassion, joy, or is it coming from greed, anger, ignorance? What's the intention behind our actions? And then as far as is it wrong, as you say, to have the attachments? The thing itself isn't bad or harmful necessarily. But the question is, you know, when I think of like my life back then and I had lots of money, my God, I wish I had that money right now. You know, I would be using it very differently. So the money itself was not the problem. The problem was I was miserable doing what I was doing to get it. I absolutely wasted it on meaningless things that I thought were important, that all they did was fulfill my ego, you know? The things themselves aren't wrong. How do we get them? What do we do with them when we have them? And then the key with the non-attachment piece is, and non-attachment doesn't mean you don't care. Non-attachment is, what happens if you lose it? And the greatest sense of attachment is to our sense of self. And a few years back, Mark, a good friend of mine, he asked a question of Buddha for you, and he's a young dude, he's a physician, and he was new to Buddhist practice, maybe 3, 4, 5 months. And he asked a question one night, and basically, Mark and Christy, his wife, they were talking about who are we? And she's a nurse. Who are we if we're not a doctor and a nurse? Right? Like the biggest attachment was, I am Mark, I'm a doctor. That's the story, that's the role, that's who he plays. That's who he plays. But who is he beyond? His whole life has been built towards becoming a doctor. Everything. That's a lot of years. Right? But who is he beyond that? And could he just turn around and walk away and no longer be a doctor, and then who would he be left with? Is his whole identity based on his career and his profession? Biggest attachment is to the attachment to the sense of self, the ego, our pride, the stories we tell ourselves. None of them wrong, bad necessarily. But what do we do to get it? What do we do with it when we have it? And what happens when we lose it? Does that address your question? Yeah, sure. Non-attachment is one of the most common requested, or commented questions, because we're all attached to a lot of things and people and places, So it's why when the Buddha left home, the first thing he did, cut his hair. He was a prince, and so his hair was a sign of him being a prince, and it was long and beautiful and flowing, and he chopped it as a sign to show that he was renouncing his attachment to those things that he always thought were important. And for lay people, we're not monks, we're not nuns, you don't have to go cutting your hair. Well, we don't have to worry about it, but you know what I mean? But recognize what you're attached to and see if you move beyond some of those attachments, how it alters your life in a good or bad way, Yeah. So we'll close on that. Join palms. The benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Jack during his time of suffering, and to his family who suffer as well. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace.